What happens when the world's most feared superpower quietly runs out of trustworthy friends? Crushing sanctions, fractured alliances, and vanishing markets are choking Russia's every diplomatic move. China offers help, but at a hidden price. The global south watches closely, refusing to fully commit. One desperate alliance now threatens to backfire completely, and Moscow's very next move could decide everything.
The systemic sanctions squeeze and Western decoupling. Since 2022, the United States, Europe, and their allies have been slowly cutting Russia off from the world's financial system. At first, these were just small punishments, but over time, they turned into something much bigger. A wall built brick by brick to keep Russia locked out for good. Banks stopped working with Russia. Trade routes closed. Even simple things, like buying spare parts for machines, became almost impossible. This wasn't just about punishing Russia for the war. It was about weakening the country for years to come, making sure it couldn't rebuild its military or its economy quickly. Groups like the U.S. Treasury and top researchers have tracked this shift closely, and they all agree on one thing: the West isn't backing down anytime soon. So Moscow has been forced to search for new partners in stranger and riskier places. But here's the real question: who would actually agree to help a country the whole world is trying to isolate?
The asymmetric partnership with China. When most of the world turned its back on Russia, one country didn't: China. Moscow started selling China cheap oil and gas, and in return, China gave Russia technology and political support. On the surface, it looks like a strong friendship, but look closer and the picture changes. China is very careful. It never crosses lines that would upset the West, and it always makes sure it gets the better deal. Russia sells its energy at a discount, while China buys at bargain prices and holds all the power in the relationship. Experts who study this partnership call it no limits in name only. In reality, Russia is starting to look less like an equal partner and more like a smaller player leaning on a much bigger one just to survive. It's a partnership built on need, not trust. And that raises an uncomfortable question for Moscow. What happens when the country you depend on the most starts calling all the shots?
The BRICS illusion versus transactional reality. Russia loves to talk about BRICS, the group that includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as proof that the world isn't just controlled by the West anymore. Moscow even pushes new payment systems, like BRICS Clear, hoping to escape Western banks entirely. And yes, BRICS countries have refused to isolate Russia or fully join Western sanctions. That's a win, in a way. But here's the catch. These same countries still do plenty of business with the West. They're not choosing sides. They're keeping every door open, just in case. So while Russia enjoys the appearance of powerful new allies, the truth is messier. BRICS gives Moscow a sense of confidence and a talking point for its people back home. But when it comes to real commitments, member countries are careful to stay neutral. They'll trade with Russia, but they won't fight for it. So is BRICS really Russia's lifeline, or just a comfortable illusion?
The pivot to pariah states for military survival. As Russia's supply chains broke down and factories struggled to keep up with the war, Moscow had to make an uncomfortable choice. It turned to two of the most heavily sanctioned countries in the world, North Korea and Iran. North Korea has reportedly sent troops to support Russian military operations, something almost unheard of in modern history. Iran, meanwhile, has supplied drone technology that Russia now depends on for its war effort. This is a massive shift for a country that once saw itself as a global superpower. Now it's leaning on nations that most of the world avoids entirely. This move doesn't just hurt Russia's reputation, it also complicates relationships with countries like South Korea and Israel, who watch these alliances very closely. Analysts studying the war call this a sign of real desperation, not strength. So the question becomes obvious. When your closest military partners are the world's most isolated countries, how much longer can this strategy actually hold?
The weaponization of energy and permanent market losses. Russia once believed it held a powerful weapon: energy. By cutting off gas supplies to Europe, Moscow hoped to force countries into backing down. Instead, the plan backfired. Europe scrambled to find new energy sources. And shockingly, it worked. Countries diversified fast, leaving Russia's old customers behind for good. Meanwhile, Russia redirected its oil to India and China, but at steep discounts, cutting deeply into profits. Major Russian energy companies, like Rosneft and Lukoil, have watched their value shrink under the weight of ongoing U.S. sanctions. What was supposed to be Russia's biggest bargaining chip has instead become a symbol of lost power. Energy experts tracking these shifts agree. Russia's reputation as a dependable supplier is gone, probably for good. Now, its economy leans heavily on just a couple of buyers who know exactly how much leverage they hold. And that leaves Moscow facing a harsh reality. What happens when your biggest customers realize they're the ones in control?
The chilling effect of secondary sanctions. Even countries that stayed friendly with Russia are starting to get nervous. New sanctions rules threaten to punish any bank, anywhere in the world, that helps Russia move money. This is called a secondary sanction, and it's working exactly as intended. Banks in China, Turkey, and the UAE have started slowing down, delaying, or outright blocking Russian transactions. Nobody wants to risk losing access to US dollars and the global banking system just to help Moscow. This creates a chilling effect. Trade becomes slower, more expensive, and far more complicated. Imports cost more, deals fall through. Even countries that quietly support Russia are pulling back to protect themselves. Financial analysts and researchers tracking Russia's workaround economy say this fear is spreading fast, even in countries that never officially joined Western sanctions. It shows just how much power the US dollar system still holds worldwide. So here's the real twist. If even Russia's friends are too scared to help, who exactly is left?
Waning influence in the post-Soviet sphere. For decades, Russia acted like the protector of its neighboring countries, the ones that used to be part of the Soviet Union. But that image is falling apart. Kazakhstan, a longtime partner, has started quietly following Western sanctions to protect its own economy. Even more shocking, Armenia, once a close military ally, has pulled away from the Russian-led CSTO alliance entirely. Armenia is now looking to the West for protection instead, especially after Russia failed to step in during the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. This is a big deal. These countries relied on Russia for security for generations. Now they're realizing that promise might not hold up when it actually matters. Researchers who study the region say this shift is happening fast, and it's not slowing down. Former Soviet nations are spreading out their alliances, hedging their bets, and looking for new friends. Which leaves Russia with a painful truth to face. If its own neighbors don't trust it anymore, who will?
The Global South strategy of transactional hedging. Across Africa, Latin America, and South Asia, many countries have refused to punish Russia the way the West wanted. But don't mistake that for loyalty. These nations are playing a smart, careful game. They're happy to buy cheap Russian grain, fertilizer, and oil, deals too good to pass up. But when it comes to actually supporting Russia's war or recognizing its territorial claims at the United Nations, these same countries stay silent. Researchers call this strategy transactional hedging. It means these countries take what benefits them economically without ever fully committing to Russia's side politically. It's a purely practical relationship, not a loyal one. Voting records at the UN show this pattern clearly. Countries buy from Russia, but they don't defend it. For Moscow, this creates a strange kind of support. It looks like the Global South is on its side, but really, they're just taking advantage of a good deal. So how long can Russia count on friends who are only in it for themselves?
The contraction of multilateral diplomacy. Russia used to have a powerful seat at the table in major international organizations. Not anymore. It's been suspended or kicked out of groups like the Council of Europe and the UN Human Rights Council. Even in places where it's still technically a member, like the OSCE, Russian diplomats face travel bans and cold receptions wherever they go. This might sound like just paperwork and politics, but it's actually huge. These organizations are where countries usually settle disagreements, build trust, and shape global rules together. Without a real seat at these tables, Russia loses its voice in shaping the future of international law and policy. Experts who track these institutions say Russia's influence in global diplomacy has shrunk dramatically, leaving it stuck talking mostly to a small group of sympathetic countries. It's a massive fall from where Russia once stood on the world stage, and it raises a serious question. When a country can no longer speak at the same tables as everyone else, how does it ever get back in the room?
Nuclear rhetoric as a diplomatic substitute. When diplomacy fails and military options run thin, countries sometimes reach for their scariest card: nuclear weapons. That's exactly what Russia has been doing. Moscow suspended its participation in the New START Treaty, a major nuclear arms agreement with the United States. It has also placed tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus, right on NATO's doorstep. These moves aren't about actually using nuclear weapons. They're about sending a message: don't push us too far. But experts who study global security say this kind of rhetoric doesn't solve anything. It doesn't end the war. It doesn't rebuild trust. It doesn't open new diplomatic paths forward. Instead, it shows just how few real options Russia has left. When your normal tools, trade, alliances, diplomacy, stop working, all that's left is fear. And that's a dangerous place for any country to be standing. So after 9 chapters of shrinking power, fading friendships, and failed strategies, one final question remains. What happens when even nuclear threats stop being enough?
Sanctions kept tightening. Alliances kept slipping. China took more than it gave. The global south took the deals, not the side. Old allies walked away when Moscow needed them most, and empty seats replaced Russia's voice at the world's biggest tables. When every real path closed, all that was left was fear, nuclear threats standing in for actual strategy. Moscow's diplomatic options are narrowing, and history shows what usually happens next isn't in Moscow's hands. If this story opened your eyes, subscribe, because the world is still watching.